Everyone,
Can you hear me?
welcome.
My mic working?
Welcome to you all. It's a bit bigger of a turnout than we'd anticipated. I think every seat in the room is filled. But if you could just let people know if they're lurking around the back that we're obviously video recording the presentation today, so that those who can't get into the room or those who want to watch remotely, either elsewhere on campus or in Saskatoon or PA, will be able to see a video download of this presentation probably by end of day tomorrow. And as you see, the URL is up there. It's our budget webpage for updates. You might want to bookmark that on your computer. But welcome to all of you who could make it here this morning. Just a note there that your presence here today indicates that you're all right with having your voice and image recorded. If anybody has questions at the end of the session, come down to the microphone here, so that, again, people who are unable to attend this morning's session because they're teaching or studying or they're in Saskatoon or PA or one of the remote locations are able to see this presentation. Dave and I are going to try to keep it fairly short. We're going to move through the slide deck quite quickly. The deck will be available to you as well from exactly the same page, but we want to reserve as much time as we can at the end of the presentation this morning for your questions and comments. So let's get going. Just a couple of things. I think anyone in the room who's watching what's going on across the country, whether it's Ontario, Quebec, the Maritimes, Alberta, BC, and Saskatchewan, it's challenging times for universities and post-secondaries across the country. You would have seen last week an announcement in Alberta that because of cuts to the universities there will be several thousand qualified students, particularly in Calgary and in Edmonton, who will be unable to get seats in institutions in those two cities. We can talk about that a little bit later. We're actually going to up our advertising in Calgary to try to attract qualified students to come and study at the University of Regina, particularly in areas in which we have capacity. Former president of the University of Regina, now president of both the Association of Universities and Colleges of Canada and the University of Manitoba, David Barnard, told his campus last week, and I quote, "Their Canadian universities can no longer sustain their operations within the current funding model. The way that things are structured in Canada, with a government grant providing the bulk of the operating funding and tuition and fees currently structured, David's claim is that that business model is breaking down, and that is one of the reasons that all of us now are substantially challenged." Another quick point, enrollment demand. We've had 5 or 6 years now of steady growth on our campus, largely attributable to the Faculty of Nursing, a great demand in engineering, growth in places like kinesiology and science and so on. We are now anticipating that we're heading into a period of essentially flat enrollments or even slight declines in enrollments based on demographic projections. And so we're a little bit challenged, we feel, on tuition and fee revenue.
Well, let me talk a little bit about the Saskatchewan picture. It's very similar, of course, and those of you that have been alive over the past few weeks and months and things have seen the things that are changing. Let me back up a little bit, and not necessarily talk to the things that you already know. But last year, we actually did, as a sector, we did very well. In fact, post-secondary ed, we think, got the highest increase of anyone at 4% of any of the other departments. So in terms of us selling our message to the province, in that one measure anyway, we're accomplishing it. One of the things that puts pressure on us, though, you may recall that the up to 4%, is that better? Just got a little bit of a mic problem.
Yeah, just bring it up a bit.
How's that? Okay. The sector has actually done quite well. In post-secondary ed, we got an increase of 4%, but what that translates to at the university, you may recall as well, the Saskatchewan Advantage Scholarship puts money directly into the pockets of the students. And so as a sector, we got 2%. And as you'll see as we walk through some of the slides, that's where we're getting some of the challenge in terms of how does the tuition increase and the grant increase both translate as compared to the expenses that we've got. So as you can see, we've got a challenge in the province. A number of different things that the Premier has said recently are clear signs of what that challenge is. And as well as the national demographics changing, the graduates coming out of grade 12 here in the province, and things are decreasing as well. So we've got a demographic challenge as well. And of course, as we've been talking over the years, the need to take and look to other markets outside the province and outside the country are equally as important. Let me crunch through some of the different numbers. First of all, so say, okay, where's the money coming in from? It's pretty simple. Two big pieces of the pie, government grant and tuition. So roughly 55% and 36% roughly. Two other small bits and pieces, and I'd say don't get distracted by these because an awful lot of them are flow through, but recoveries is a number of different things that is money that comes in that's basically committed right away to those same events. So things like athletics, gate receipts is about... Athletic gates receipts is still working. Did we land? Am I good? Okay. The athletic gates receipts, as one example, is about $3.5 million of that. Utilities that we then sell to the research park or to our federated college partners, etc., is another $3 million or so. So a variety of different things. Even within the faculties, there's $2 million worth of expenses that comes in as revenue. Things like Paul Schwann Center or psychology clinics and things like that where we charge someone. And so that's the 3.5. 5.8, generally money that we get from the federal government. Two big pots, Institut Français, and the indirect costs of research. A little bit of investment income. So that's revenue. Can people still hear me at the back? Yeah? Okay. On the expense side, where do we spend it then? 74% of our expenses go into labor. We're definitely a labor-intensive industry, so the big pot of gold there goes into salaries and benefits. Some of the other pieces, of course, scholarships. This is the amount of money we spend out of our operating budget for scholarships. The total amount of scholarships is about $22 million that's distributed at this university each year. So it's healthy. I think Tom's going to speak to that a little bit later on. 2.9% for library acquisitions, 7.6% for utilities. As I mentioned before, some of that is money that we're spending about getting recovered from other people that we're selling utilities to. So only $5 million of the university budget is actually spent on university utilities. And then other. People always say, what's this big other that's there? And it's some mystery pot. The reason we break it down this way, first of all, is that these are the categories that CABO, or the University Business Officers, nationally take and collect. And so we follow their categories. They're interested in tracking things like scholarships and salaries and others, and everything else gets combined. But since there's so many questions about it, we figured we'll flash up a slide, talk about other. So what is other? Of course, the two biggest parts of other are just the day-to-day expenses in the faculties. So we've got one piece of the pie in the faculties, one in admin, and that's just this is not a big number at all. The amount of money that you've got in the faculty to take and pay for your phones, your photocopies, your chemicals for your chemistry class, for your equipment for teaching supplies, the markers on the boards, photocopying, paper, travel, etc. All are very minor expenses, but they add up throughout all of the different faculties. Same sort of thing on the admin side, except in the admin side, it also includes things like the toilet paper, things like the light bulbs, changing the light bulbs, simple expenses that they can operate and maintain the university. And then similarly, you've got some other categories as you go around there. One thing people might ask about contingency, just a simple $4.1 million in case something really goes wrong at the university. We haven't had any big expenses there this year, or many surprises in the past couple of years, but it's a meager amount. Best practice says it's about 2%. Best practice says it should be much higher at 3 to 5%, but it's in there. Then a variety of other expenses and things.
So I'm going to take it over at this point. You're going to see this slide a couple of times, and we'll walk through each of those bullets, 1, 2, 3, and 4, one at a time. So we do the top one there. We're anticipating right now, and Rod Stephan, who's in the room, has been calculating spreadsheet after spreadsheet after spreadsheet what our cost increase in salaries and benefits for all employee groups across the university will be. We've just settled the faculty contract recently, and we're estimating about a $6.85 million increase and salaries and benefits to all employee groups. That's faculty, staff, everyone who works for the university or is paid by the university. We're also anticipating increased costs for things like space rental. Many people will not be aware that we rent space, say for the Saskatoon operations. We have the better part of 1,000 students up in Saskatoon doing things like social work and nursing and other programs. We need to rent space on that campus to teach those students. Here on the main campus, we rent space in Research Park for places like the Johnson Shayama Graduate School of Public Policy, for PTRC and other university operations, and we need to pay rental. Those are going up. Utilities, I think everybody's aware, are a bit of a challenge. The heat, the water, and everything that we need to make sure that the campus is comfortable and safe. And then, of course, there's increases in other essentials. Just to buy books now for the library, given what's happened to the Canadian dollar, we're already projecting higher than anticipated expenses, or higher expenses than we would have anticipated 6 months ago for the costs of things like that. Can we move on to the next one, Dave? So here's a very, very quick set of figures. And note up there, this is one scenario. We're doing all kinds of models. We're trying to think through what various implications are and to see how those numbers fall out as we think through what is possible for next year. So we begin with a 14-15 tuition revenue dividend. Let me explain what that is. Because Livia and her team in UR International did better than expected on international student enrollments, we are $500,000 above current year projections, 14-15 projections on tuition revenue. So what we're going to do is take that $500,000 dividend, if you like, or surplus, and start the next fiscal, the 15-16 fiscal, with it. If we get a 0% on the operating grant, if we get no increase in the operating grant, it stays exactly what it is this year. If we, and this is again purely hypothetical, tuition discussions will be ongoing and the final rate of tuition is approved by the Board of Governors. But if we get tuition rate increases averaging 3%, we'll get $1.883 million. And if our enrollments drop by 1%, we lose about $568,000 in revenue. So this is one scenario showing us with $1.815 million based on those figures.
Good. Before I keep going, maybe there's some people outside, if we can just let them filter in and things like that and come down the sides. Unfortunately, Tom didn't get us enough revenue. He got to do the revenue slide. He's got a very small number in there. Or he's left me on the other side, the big number for the expenses. So this is our projections. Again, one set of estimates. And the reason we're coming to you today is that this is really early in the process. We won't be preparing the budget to go to the board until the May board meeting, so 3 months from now. So that's why we're seeking input in your advice at this early stage. And so all we can do is take and do some forecasting. We'll be back to you after the provincial budget with some better numbers in terms of one of the elements anyway, in terms of the grant, but always looking forward in terms of next year's enrollments and things. Those are always projections. So Tom spoke about the salary and benefit increase, the space rentals, etc. One of the other things that we recognize is that there's always some commitments made from year to year. There's always some places that we know that we need to take and invest. In fact, we hope that there's places we can take and invest that take and generate additional revenue to take and increase the revenue side, because it's not just reducing expenses. But if we can increase revenues, that helps us an equal amount. So we're saying at least, we'd like to do at least $1 million worth of reinvestments into priority areas. So if you add all that up, we need an additional $8 million. Now, one of the things, and I'll talk about this in a minute, but the voluntary incentive program for retirement had a bigger uptake in the previous year. So we're thinking in one scenario, might generate an additional $600,000 to our bottom line. So that means a net expense increase of $7.4 million. I'll come back to that in a minute, but just let me talk about...
Can you just go back one?
Let me talk about the incentive program.
Just a footnote there under potential reinvestment, an example. Last year, for example, there was a proposal from the Graduate School of Public Policy to launch a new Master of Health Administration degree. We looked at the business case very carefully. It looked promising. We made an investment to allow them to launch that new master's degree. It has now doubled its initial enrollment projections. That's the kind of thing that we're looking for potential reinvestments in years to come.
We'll come back to the numbers in a minute, but first just to explain, and this is old news, but some people may not recall that we had last year a voluntary incentive program for retirement. It took and softened the blow significantly last year. In fact, last year we made significant investments in a number of different academic positions, research investment, and things like that. The fact that the uptake was almost double what we expected is going to take and translate to a little bit of a savings this year. So some of the numbers, and not all these decisions have been made yet, but roughly there's 19 positions that we did replace. There's 19 positions that were identified that we could forego those positions and take those savings. Of course, most of which, remember, that was to pay last year's savings and debt. And there's still 13 that we're still deliberating on. So those will feel like this year's cuts. Depending on what scenario we pick, we're looking and saying there might be a $600,000 savings. So we're pre-booking that, we're crediting it, and identified that to take and reduce our anticipated need this year. So, okay, good. So we're back to the numbers. The structural issue then. Let me talk about it. We put those two numbers together. The one that Tom spoke about the revenue increases, the one I spoke about in terms of expense increases. You put them together. This is where our real challenge is. A shortfall of just under $6 million. And so if we took and did across-the-board cuts, which we're not going to be doing, but if you just took across the areas that are that can be cut at all, it works out to be almost a 4% increase across the board. Tom?
So we talked about enrollments. Students are the lifeblood of the university. That's why we're located here and in Saskatoon and PA and teaching remotely. As I said, we've had a number of years of growth, largely attributable to the new Faculty of Nursing, which is now effectively full at 1,400 undergraduates. We've had growth in science, in part because of what nursing has helped to bring in. We've had tremendous growth in engineering, but we're at capacity in engineering, and smaller pockets of growth in places like kinesiology and health studies, the Graduate School of Public Policy, and so on. But we're starting to look out at our largest pool. Our undergraduate population is roughly 88% of our enrollments, and getting numbers from the school districts in the region and asking them what they project to be their high school leaver numbers, and it's looking as if it's going to be challenging. International recruitment, of course, has been also a mainstay of the University of Regina in recent years. That's becoming increasingly challenging because it's increasingly competitive as more and more universities seek to attract those students to their campuses. So what we need to do is to begin to plan for an era in which we think enrollments will be flat or in slight decline for at least another couple of years. The bulge in the population, you've heard that the province is planning to build 3 new elementary schools in Regina. We will not see those young people to be at university age for some years yet. And the high school districts or the educational districts tell us now that the next bulge is probably 5 years out. So we need to plan for this for about the next 5 years. So we're working very hard, and there are people in this room who are engaged in this day-to-day to recruit students, qualified students, from outside our traditional catchment area, which is Regina and a 2-hour drive. We're actively recruiting students in Alberta, Manitoba, Ontario, and internationally to come and study at our fine programs at the University of Regina. We also need to worry about our enrollment mix. What is the proper balance of undergraduate and graduate according to the capacity that we have in our various faculties and department? What do we need to do, and this is a large part of our new strategic plan, what do we need to do to increase the rate of student retention to help those who are struggling, particularly in that transition from year 1 to 2, to give them the supports that are necessary to get them to stay in university and complete a degree. And then finally, in the mix, tuition fee levels. We're very conscious of the financial burden that students face. We're very conscious of the fact that large numbers of our students are working 15, 20, 25, even 30 hours or more a week to pay tuition, and so we're trying hard to keep tuition and fee levels down. Those are set and approved by the Board of Governors. So just a couple of things. Again, you will know this. Most of you will know this. We are 18th lowest of 59 English-speaking Canadian universities in average tuition and fees. And in areas like business and engineering, we're 23 and 33% below tuition levels at peer institutions, i.e. the other comprehensives in Canada that offer those programs. And we're very proud of the fact that among the comprehensives, we offer the second highest level, the second highest proportion of operating revenues to our students in the form of financial support.
As I click the slide, maybe if we can there's still some people out in the hallway, if we can let them in and down the hallway, so pull them in for us.
So let me just speak to this briefly. This looks really complicated, and I know from the back of the room you probably can't see it, so you might want to go back when this thing goes up on the website by tomorrow afternoon and take a look at this. But that in a snapshot is what we've looked like from 2006 to 2015. That's a graphic showing you shifting patterns of student demand for the various faculties and their offering at the university. And most notably, you can see what we're seeing across the country. In 2006, and this does not include CCE teaching, so evenings, weekends, spring, summer, it's pure faculty teaching. We've gone from 55.7 thousand credit hours in the Faculty of Arts to 39.4. It's a very big drop, and it's mirrored by what's happening across the country as arts enrollments are challenged. And so on, you can read them up there. Fine arts is down from 99.45 to 59.13, and so on, all the way up. At the top there, you see that black line is GSPP. It's very small. Those are the graduate programs in that school. And nursing, of course, bringing up right at the top from growth, from initiation in 2012 with 1,800 credit hours to nearly 11,000 credit hours. So that, in a snapshot, is shifting patterns of student demand at this university from 2006 to 2015, mirroring to an extent what's happening across the country in these disciplines, and showing, of course, the fact that our growth has largely been in areas like nursing and engineering.
One of our other challenges is sustaining capital. I don't think I need to explain this one too much, but this is the lab equipment in the labs, the teaching equipment we've got. I got there, like microscopes and things, as well as our leaky roofs or broken chairs or whatever. We have had a decreasing amount, and particularly with the purchasing power, decreasing amount over the past couple of years, and we can see it and feel it on the campus right now. And so last year, you might recall that we actually took and augmented the sustaining capital budget a little bit with some money from operating into capital. Probably one of the most important moves we made from operating in capital was in two faculties, so in science and in engineering, actually built in a base budget of $200,000 for teaching equipment, recognizing the fact that it's just, there's not enough in the sustaining capital pot, so we better take and augment it from the operating fund. So in so much as that not only puts pressure on the campus and the operations and things, if we need to move money from operating to help those parts of our operation, the equipment and capital parts, then that will add additional pressure. So it's low enough as it is right now, but it could get worse.
So a couple of positives. I fought for this slide so I could bring you some good news instead of Dave. Obviously, we've had retirements, and as Dave has mentioned, with the voluntary incentive program for retirements, there have been departures that way from faculty and staff positions. It's very important for a university, a comprehensive university, to try to keep its tenure track complement up, its research-intensive complement up, because so much of our reputation and our national performance depends on research, which is done by tenure track faculty. So over the past year, 33 tenure track searches and 10 term positions are either in process or have been nailed down, and we have converted 7 term positions in various departments to tenure track in order to try to ensure that students are taught by full-time faculty who are research active and who are generating reputation, citations, and in many of the disciplines, actual research revenue for the university. We also increased our support for research activities by nearly $500,000 in last year's budget. As Dave has mentioned, the two kind of, if you like, heavy equipment, faculties, engineering, and science, where you've got a lot of technical equipment, we gave them each $200,000. And again, just a note that perhaps some people in the room don't see every day. Our Center for Continuing Education, which is responsible for a huge range of activities, everything from ESL through to the teaching that is done in off-peak hours and in spring, summer, You'll see, if you look through the budget book of the university, what looks to be a very big budget for CCE, about $16 million in operating expenses. But CCE doesn't operate like the faculties do. It's cost recovery. So it's got to make that $15 or $16 million. And then on top of it, we've targeted to earn another nearly $7 million, which immediately flows back into line faculties and other departments to help sustain their operations. So that $6.7 million is going back into arts, into education, into fine arts, into engineering, into science, into nursing and other places of the university, as well as admin units, to help us balance those budgets. It's a revenue center for the university and a very important one. And it also, of course, helps us keep our fairly high level of student financial support where it is. So, that's nearly the end of the presentation. This is going to be a challenging year. We know it. And we are going to be consulting more than we've ever done, I think, before, with various bodies across campus. Today is the first of a series of updates that we will be undertaking as we learn more things, such as when the province announces the operating grant on budget day in March. We'll have another update for you then. If we need one in the interim because some major parameter shifts, we'll do that. But we're going to be consulting very, very intensively with campus, obviously with the Council Committee on Budget. It's a very important group for us to consult with, and ULT, which is the group that comprises all of the leaders on campus, academic and administrative.
So Tom said he got to have the final positive slide, but no, I get it. There's no doubt that this is a challenge. This is the first time we've done this particular budget presentation at this time of the year. Normally we just would do one after the provincial budget comes out, but as Tom has mentioned and I've already said, we're getting way out in advance, giving you some early insights. Those of you that have been working closer on the budget would have known this year, or last year at this time, we had and so for the leaders across the campus, we were probably talking $3 to $4 million that we needed to find. This time we've got to find $6 million. We've done it before. We'll do it again this time. The university is in good shape, and especially if we look at it relative to our counterparts. Look east or west, look anywhere across the country. Newfoundland might be the anomaly, but relative to the kinds of financial challenges and things that other universities have anywhere in the country, we're still in good shape. We know that we can get through this. Together we are stronger, as they say. And what we're looking for is your advice. Where is the best place to take and generate additional revenues or make the budget savings that we need without impacting the things that are most important to us? And so Tom and I can't do it ourselves. We're looking for you folks to give us the best advice with the people on the ground who know where it can be done the best. So together we are stronger. Piatasi Yawi now. So we are now open for questions. That's not what it translates to, but we are now open for questions.
Just before we start the questions, come on down, Kelly. There's a microphone here. If you want to ask questions so that those who are going to watch remotely can hear you, please come to the microphone. If you read Jim Pitsula's history of Regina College back in the 1920s when things were really, really tight, there's a story that might be apocryphal or not of Mrs. Stapleford, the wife of Principal Stapleford, coming across a frozen Wascana Lake to demand more money from the premier of the day. I think it was Walter Scott. If it's not true, it's a great story. So if you see us somewhere out on the frozen lake, Kelly.
Thank you for holding this meeting, and I just had a few things to say. I know there's comments I could make about maybe saving funds, but I'll do that at another time because I'm sure other people have questions. But first of all, I'd like to thank Vianne Timmons on her excellent leadership at the university here. I think a great reason for the increased growth we've had and success this campus has been a result of her leadership. So first of all, I'd like to thank her. And then I'd also want to say that this university means a lot to me because I was a student here back years ago when, you can believe it or not, tuition was as low as $100 per class. So that's really shocking how things have changed, and I know sustainability financially is going to be a serious issue going forward. So I know we talk about other sustainabilities, but financial sustainability is a serious issue. And I just wanted to say that if I get a chance to retire in the next year, which I plan on doing, it'll maybe open up a position for another employee out here to not get laid off. I know it's tough, but I'm prepared to make that sacrifice. I plan on looking after my mother. She's getting old and she needs help, but I wanted to say that people are the biggest resource out here, and the whole reason we're all here is because of the students. And I know Brad Wall talked about a savings of his cost of living allowance, and thank you for that, but I wanted to say that a cost of living allowance for somebody who's making over $100,000 a year isn't that great a sacrifice compared to people that are working here that could possibly lose their jobs. And like I say, we are a resource here. We're here for a reason. We're here to support the students and to make the world a better place, and that's what we want to do. So I hope we can all work together to try to see that result. So thank you very much.
Maybe just in response to the, thank you very much, Kelly. Those are absolutely fantastic comments, and I think from the sentiment of the crowd, you can sort of hear how well it resonates. All aspects in terms of either the president's engagement with the campus or the student tuition levels, and the most important message is how important our people are. And that's why last year, and our goal is this year as well, not necessarily a retirement program, but the reason we did the retirement program last year was because it's the most people-friendly way to do it. There's other ways that it can be done. Our intent is to continue to keep that as the highest priority, to be, whatever we do, be people-friendly and recognize that we are a people industry, both teaching people and done by people. 74% of our expenses are people, and so they are indeed our best resource. So thank you. I don't think we definitely couldn't have said it better. Thank you,
Thanks, Kelly.
Sylvain Rowe. I'll represent the ERFA today. I have a few specific questions about the budget. In your projections increase for salaries, you said that it includes the recently bargained academic increase. Does it also include increase for APT?
No, we have made a projection there, but that contract, it will be under negotiation, so we've only been able to project. The figure that we cited of 6.85 includes everything that we can reasonably know or project for next year, and it includes things not only like the scale increases, the settlement of the contract, the economic increase, but progression through the ranks, CGIs, merit, and everything else in our various employee groups. It's the whole number.
And I might add, and benefits as well. So all of the negotiated increases to, say, wellness programs, health spending accounts, APA, things like that, are expenses that are factored into that. And as Tom mentioned, it's estimated for those that aren't settled and actuals for those that get settled.
What could be the effect on sessionals?
We don't know yet. We'll have to see what the grant comes in at. We're watching enrollments. Again, there are people in the room right now who prepare what are called enrollment funnels. We look at what's happening in terms of applications, acceptances, and the conversion of those acceptances to registration. It's early days, but we're watching those on a week-by-week basis to see the number of students we think we'll have, and therefore the amount of tuition and fee revenue we think we'll have in September. But at this point, we don't know.
You talked about funding coming from the federal for the Institut Français, for example. Has this funding been confirmed?
We believe it has, yes. 1.2 or 1.25 million each year. And of course, many people in the room are aware that there's a very exciting initiative underway there to bring together the Institut Français and the Department of French in a new unit. That will be coming through the approvals process, the collegial approvals process very shortly. So that's exciting.
And finally, what are you going to do with the directive from the Minister of Education to freeze out-of-scope positions?
Well, that was the Premier speaking on Friday. We are listening very carefully. The out-of-scope compensation is very much the purview of the board. So over the next few days, we will be talking amongst ourselves, amongst the executive, hearing more information from government, making a consideration of the right way to go forward for the university, and then making a recommendation at the appropriate time, which will probably be March, to the Board of Governors for their decision.
Thank you.
Lots of time for more questions. We've got another 20 minutes.
It's Doug.
25, actually.
Good morning. I'm Doug Fairnick from the Department of Mathematics and Statistics. I have kind of a technical question. It has to do with CCE. CCE is a great resource, don't get me wrong, but I do note that they teach on campus in spring and summer. And if I look at my academic unit, we teach, I'm going to estimate 600 to 800 credit hours in spring and summer. And that's a heck of a lot of tuition. And it goes to CCE. There's a lot of overhead that rests with the University of Regina, with human resources, with the Faculty of Science for posting the jobs. I, as department head, am reviewing resumes, hiring people, and so on and so forth. So there's some, indirect costs that are borne by the university. But the thing is, if I look at the operation of the university as a whole, it's a 12-month operation, and we're collecting tuition. We, the University of Regina, are collecting tuition on 2/3 of that, at least in terms of time. And I'm just wondering what the thinking is regarding having CCE responsible for teaching spring-summer classes, collecting the tuition revenue for that. And if we look at the way students are, a lot of students maybe aren't taking a full load of 5 classes now, and they do like to take courses in spring and summer. And so I'm just wondering, what is the impact on the budget, for or against, if that work that CCE does in spring and summer were just taken over by the university itself?
Okay, that's a hugely complex set of questions, so let me try to peel them back. First part, the model that we've got for CCE, where effectively they do the old peak teaching, the teaching that does not occur in the September and January terms between about 8:30 and 4:30, is something that actually reflects a much earlier reality. Have we got any active discussions underway to shift that dramatically? No. Do we perhaps need to look at that in coming years? I think perhaps we do need to look at that. But Doug, a couple of things. If we shift, first off, the 6.7 million profit, if you like, that CCE earns after covering all of its expenses, all of its salaries, its benefits, its operating costs, and so on, actually flows back out into faculty budgets like science and arts and engineering, as I said earlier. If CCE weren't there, we wouldn't have that 6.7 million bucks. If the teaching goes back into the line faculties, let's say that CCE disappeared, which it's not going to do, but the teaching that it's currently doing for the academic programs, as opposed to ESL and credit, were put back into the faculties, we would have to rethink the faculty's business models. Because if that teaching were done, say, by tenure-track faculty, it becomes more expensive to do. Since tenure-track faculty cost more per course for teaching than does a sessional lecture. And the vast majority of CCE's teaching is done by sessional lecturers. So it would require a kind of a rethinking of the university's business model. I think one of the things we're all in universities across the country trying to do is to get our minds around the implications of these huge changes in patterns of student demand. And of course, the other great elephant in the room is technology. Any number of students who are here on campus, even living in residence rooms, are now taking a number of their courses online rather than coming to class. And that has grown, I think, there'll be somebody in the room who can correct me if I'm wrong, it's grown 110% in about 3 or 4 years, online enrollments. Do we put that back strictly into the faculty? Should that be a CCE function? I think those are good questions. So that's a kind of a poor initial attempt to answer a very complex set of embedded questions that are good ones to ask. Dave, you must have a bit to add there.
Sure. In a very, very simple way, I'd say that the choice as to where the teaching is done is in the first instance made at the faculty. So the courses that you want to take and teach and things during spring and summer, because there's lots of faculty courses taught through the faculty without going through CCE in the summer, right? And so that decision. But what we've seen is a trend, and it really shows here that the faculties are moving more of their teaching into CC. So let me give you some numbers. And maybe it's the incentive program that we built is excessively incentive, excessively strong of an incentive. And so maybe we're getting too much. So let me give you a couple other numbers. The profit is about 6.7 million. It's been growing about 2 million a year. So even in the years when we've been getting good government grants, the CCE additional profit to the university, which is then distributed to the faculties and administrative units, is bigger than the increase in the government grant. So it's important to us. So growing it helps in every way possible. In addition to that profit, and by the way, their total budget is over $20 million now. So something that, congratulations to the folks in CC, they are doing incredible work. Much of it is with the support of the faculties in terms of teaching credit programs. Much of it is non-credit that they generally do themselves. An additional number, last year it was 1.2 million. It was given back as a dividend to the individual faculties in proportion to the amount of teaching that they did. That is above and beyond anything that's in the base budget and gives some very important flexibility to the teaching units. I'd expect that this year that's probably increased to about 1.5 million. So that's not insignificant either. But I'd say sitting down and looking as a faculty in terms of where keeping the right amount of teaching in the right places by the right people, which has always been the right thing to do, and I'm sure that's what you spend most of your time in your faculty thinking about, is what you have to continue doing. And is the balance, it is tended to go more and more to CCE. Is that balance right? And I think you have all the control necessary at the faculty level to take and right-size that if you like.
And I didn't pick up on one part of your question that I should have. You mentioned administrative functions like HR and financial services and so on. By just about every index that we're aware of, that is the national comparators done by CAUBO, the Canadian Association of University Business Officers, that looks at these things from campus to campus. We are administratively quite lean on this campus. The number of people, for example, who do payroll for this institution is proportionately very small. The number of people who do things like various financial services functions is comparatively small for the size of this campus. And I want to recognize here before people in this room the fantastic work that the people in the APT and QP groups do to keep this institution running. Many of them are carrying very heavy workloads. Many of them, their commitment to the institution is absolutely undoubted, but they are working extremely hard to ensure that the work of the institution in things like financial reporting, human resources, risk assessment and management, health and safety, facilities management, and all of those things, that work is well done so that we have a safe and usable campus, and I want to thank them very much.
David Gregory, Faculty of Nursing. Thank you so much for this presentation. It was very, very helpful. Could we go back to Dr. Bernard's observation?
Slide 2.
Yeah, so this is really interesting because I think what he's suggesting is third order change or radical change in university models. And I'm just wondering, it's a hypothetical question, but is there a national dialogue about where universities might be going, or a provincial dialogue about where universities might be going with respect to funding models?
Let's both try to have a kick at that. There's all kinds of discussions going on because I think across the country, as David says, we've recognized in the last 2 to 3 years particularly, what's happening now is not sustainable for the long term. So you start to look at what's being done in other jurisdictions. If you look at south of the border, there are things happening in the United States that I don't think we'd want to see happening at Canadian comprehensives or even Canadian undergraduate institutions. Places like the University of Oregon, that a generation ago were getting roughly the same level of government support that we are getting now, are down to 7 and 8 cents on the dollar from their state governments. So the University of Oregon, for example, which is a big public university of roughly 40,000 students, gets about 7 cents on the dollar from the state. The way that they have continued to operate that school, as I understand it, is to bring in large numbers of students unable to get seats in California, to populate their seats up in Oregon and make up the tuition and fee revenue that's necessary. We don't want to go there. And the argument that we keep putting forward to government, and I believe, as Dave has pointed out, though many might not agree with us, we've been relatively successful in terms of the various ministries in this province, is that every dollar you put into education, whether it's K to 12 or post-secondary, will save you money elsewhere. It will create a happier, better informed, healthier population. It will lead to more economic growth. It will lead to all kinds of good things. Education, in some ways, shouldn't be regarded as an expense. It should be regarded as an investment. At the same time, governments are faced with strong fiscal pressures. Health costs are going up staggeringly. Costs of running a social services system, the Ministry of Justice, highways, and everything else all compete for the dollars that we would like to get. So do we have, David, your real question is the crystal ball question. Do we know what it's going to look like in 10 to 15 to 20 years? Quick answer is no. Are we very sure that it's going to be quite different from what we see now? Yes, it will.
Sure, I can ask definitively, or answer definitively on one of the questions in terms of are we looking nationally at that. In my spare time, I'm also the president of CABO, the Canadian Association of University Business Officers. They have engaged a consultant because every university is going through this same sort of thing. So they've engaged a consultant to take and look at it two different ways. What's happening across campus, and then coming up with answers and a series of best practices and things like that. So what can we do? What can we learn from each other to take and do, hopefully make the pain even less? Built into that will be a lobbying element in terms of how can we sell our business better. That is what AUCC is doing. And so, of course, on the AUCC agenda, which, of course, the president is a member of that and chairs one of the subcommittees, is looking also at how can they take and lobby better, and in particular are taking and emphasizing the upcoming federal budget, and of course being at the national level. So there's a series of things. You can definitely say that we're trying to take and position post-secondary education as best we can, and then also understand the realities of what it is and how we can do better. So thank you very much for that question as well.
We've still got about 10 or 12 minutes if there are other questions people would like to ask.
If not,
thank you very much for coming today. Please give us at that email address you see there, budget@uregina.ca, any suggestions, ideas, questions that you might have about the budget process. And we will commit to keeping you informed throughout the budget formation process in coming weeks and months. As Dave said, and he's the optimist, I'm going to let him conclude, we are in comparatively good shape. We've got some challenges, but this is a strong place with many, many, many wonderful people working throughout the organization. We'll get through these challenges this year with your advice, your help, and your support.
and absolutely. We could maybe get Kelly to come up here and give us our closing comments. Because it's you folks and things. There's no magic. Like Tom and I don't have magic. We don't. We're just two of the 26.
You got to watch these finance guys.
Two of the, believe it or not, 2,600 paychecks we cut each month. I think the actual number is 2,639 paychecks cut each month and things. Of course, that includes the TAs and people working in fitness and lifestyle center, as well as our faculty members and Tom and I. But it's together we can figure it out. And so that's what we need. So any advice, any thoughts, either directly there or up through, what's even better is up through the chain of command, convincing, working with your colleagues, bringing it forward at the department level, etc. By all means, we're looking for it. We've got 3 months. It's not like this is the end. This is the beginning. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.